The room went completely silent the moment Love and Hip Hop Atlanta cameras caught Yandy Smith pacing back and forth, her voice trembling, but not from weakness. No, this was something else. Something final. Something explosive. And standing just a few feet away, Mendeecees Harris had no idea what was about to hit him. Because what started as a tense conversation quickly spiraled into a jaw-dropping confession that no one, especially Keisha Nichols, was prepared for. "You think I'm gonna keep doing this?" Yandy snapped, her eyes blazing with a mix of hurt and fury. "I'm done, Mendeecees. I mean it this time." The words hung in the air like a bomb that had just gone off. Keisha's face said it all, completely stunned, frozen in disbelief as she tried to process what she was hearing. This wasn't just another argument. This wasn't one of those dramatic moments fans had grown used to. No. This felt different. Final. Dangerous. And Mendeecees. He didn't even react at first. Almost like he couldn't believe Yandy had actually said it out loud. "I sacrificed everything for this family," Yandy continued, her voice cracking as emotions ran high. "And what do I get back? Lies. Distance. Disrespect." That's when things took an even darker turn. Because just as Keisha tried to step in, trying to calm the storm, Yandy dropped the ultimate shocker. "I'm ready to walk away. For real this time." Fans are shocked. The cast is shaken. And the family. Completely divided. Because if Yandy walks away, everything changes. The tension didn't just sit in the air, it pressed down on everyone in the room like something heavy, something impossible to ignore. Yandy's words were still echoing and nobody moved, not Keisha, not Mendeecees, not even the cameras seemed ready for what had just unfolded, because this wasn't just another argument. This was something that felt final. Mendeecees finally let out a slow breath, shaking his head like he was trying to wake himself up from a bad dream. "You don't mean that," he said quietly, but there was a crack in his voice that betrayed him. "You always say things when you're mad." Yandy laughed, but it wasn't a happy laugh, it was sharp, cold, almost unrecognizable. "No, this time I mean every single word." She shot back, stepping closer to him, her eyes locked on his. "You think this is a game? You think I'm just gonna keep forgiving and forgetting like I always do?" Keisha shifted uncomfortably, glancing between them. "Okay, hold on, this is getting out of control." She tried to intervene, raising her hands slightly. "Y'all both need to just breathe for a second, because this right here, this ain't healthy." But Yandy wasn't listening, not anymore. Her emotions had clearly reached a breaking point and there was no turning back. "No, Keisha, let him hear this," she said firmly, not even looking in her direction. "Because I've been quiet for too long." Fans are shocked because this side of Yandy rarely comes at this raw, this unfiltered, and it was clear something deeper had been building behind the scenes, something the cameras hadn't fully captured until now. Mendeecees ran a hand over his face, frustration starting to rise. "So what, you just gonna throw everything away, everything we built, because you're in your feelings right now?" That's when Yandy's expression changed completely, the hurt flashing across her face turning into something stronger, something almost unbreakable. "My feelings," she repeated slowly, her voice dropping. "You think this is about feelings? This is about respect, this is about loyalty, and you've been playing with both." Keisha's eyes widened slightly, clearly realizing this was about to go even further than anyone expected. "What is she talking about, Mendeecees?" she asked cautiously, her tone now more serious. He hesitated just for a second, but that second was enough. It didn't go unnoticed. Yandy caught it immediately, and that hesitation told her everything she needed to know. "See that right there?" Yandy pointed at him, her voice rising again. "That hesitation, that is exactly what I've been dealing with. You can't even answer straight anymore, because you're twisting everything." Mendeecees snapped back, his patience finally breaking. "You take one little thing and blow it up into something it's not." Yandy stepped back, shaking her head slowly, disbelief written all over her face. "One little thing," she repeated, her voice almost whispering now, but somehow even more powerful. "You really think this is one thing?" The room felt like it was closing, and Keisha looked visibly stressed, now caught in the middle of something that was clearly years in the making. "Okay, somebody needs to explain, because I feel like I walked into the middle of a storm I didn't see coming." And that's when Yandy turned toward her finally, her expression softening just a little, but the pain was still there, still raw. "You didn't see it because I've been protecting him," she admitted, her voice trembling slightly. "I've been holding it down, making sure nobody sees what's really been going on behind closed doors." Mendeecees scoffed, shaking his head again. "Here we go with the drama." But Yandy wasn't backing down, not this time. "No, this is the truth," she fired back instantly. "While I've been out here writing for you, holding this family together, you've been moving different." Keisha's brows furrowed, clearly trying to piece things together. "Different how?" She asked carefully. There was a pause, a heavy one, the kind that makes everyone hold their breath, and then Yandy said it. Distance lies energy that don't match what we built. She said slowly, each word hitting harder than the last. And don't act like you don't know exactly what I'm talking about. Mendeecees looked away for a brief moment, and that alone spoke volumes. Fans are shocked because this wasn't just vague accusations anymore. This felt specific, personal, like something real was finally coming to the surface. Say it then. He challenged her, turning back toward her, his jaw tight. If you got something to say, then say it. Yandy stared at him for a long moment, like she was deciding just how far she was willing to go, and then she took a deep breath. You stopped choosing me, she said simply, and the room went quiet all over again. Keisha blinked, clearly not expecting that. What does that even mean? She asked softly. It means I've been standing next to a man who don't even show up for me the way I show up for him. Yandy replied, her voice breaking slightly now. It means I've been fighting for a marriage that feels like it's already over. Mendeecees immediately shook his head. That's not true and you know it. Then prove it. Yandy shot back instantly, her eyes filling with tears she refused to let fall. Because right now all I see is a man who got comfortable, a man who thinks I'm never gonna leave. That hit something deep because Mendeecees went silent again, and this time there was no quick comeback, no denial, just silence. Keisha looked between them, her expression now more concerned than ever. This is deeper than I thought, she admitted quietly. Way deeper, Yandy said, wiping her face quickly, refusing to fully break down in front of them. And I'm tired, Keisha, I am tired. Mendeecees finally stepped forward, his voice lowering slightly. So what, you just giving up now, that's it? Yandy looked at him long and hard, and for a moment there's something that looked like hesitation, like maybe there was still a chance, but then her face hardened again. No, she said firmly, I'm finally choosing myself. And just like that, everything shifted again, because this wasn't just an argument anymore. This was a decision, one that could change everything for their family, for their future, for everything they had built together. Keisha stood there completely stunned, trying to process how things escalated so fast, how something that started as a conversation turned into something that now felt irreversible. In Mendeecees, he was no longer dismissing it, no longer brushing it off, because for the first time it was clear. He realized this wasn't just talk, this was real, and as the silence stretched between them once more, the weight of what was happening settled in deeper than ever before, because if Yandy was serious about walking away, then nothing was going to be the same after this moment, nothing at all. Mendeecees swallowed hard, the shift in his energy no longer hidden behind sarcasm or deflection. You really gonna do this right here, right now, in front of everybody? He asked, his voice lower now, almost cautious, like he was realizing just how serious this had become. But Yandy didn't flinch, not even a little. You had plenty of chances in private, she replied immediately, her tone steady but cold. You just never thought I'd actually reach my limit. Keisha let out a slow breath, stepping slightly between them again, but this time it wasn't to interrupt, it was to brace herself, because emotions ran high and she could feel this wasn't even close to being over. Y'all are talking like there's no coming back from this, she said carefully, like this is already done. Yandy's eyes flicked toward her for a moment, and there was something painful there, something that hinted she had been fighting this decision for a long time. Because maybe it is, she admitted quietly, and that one sentence hit harder than everything else she had said so far, because it didn't come from anger, it came from exhaustion. Mendeecees shook his head, pacing now, his frustration bubbling back up, but mixed with something else, something closer to panic. Nah, you don't just walk away from a marriage like that, he said, running his hands through his hair. We've been through too much for you to just throw in the towel. Yandy's expression tightened instantly. Don't you dare twist this into me giving up, she snapped, her voice rising again. I fought for this, I stayed when things didn't make sense, I held it down when nobody else would, and you wanna stand here and act like I'm the one quitting? Keisha looked at Mendeecees now, her expression sharp. She's not wrong, she said bluntly. You can't ignore what she's saying just because it makes you uncomfortable. That caught him off guard, clearly not expecting Keisha to step in like that. So you on her side now? He shot back defensively. Keisha folded her arms slightly, unimpressed. This ain't about sides, this is about truth, and right now you're not even addressing what she's feeling. Fans are shocked because the tension wasn't just between husband and wife anymore, now it was pulling everyone into it, forcing people to choose whether they wanted to acknowledge the reality or keep pretending everything was fine. And that's when things took another turn, because Yandy stepped back slightly, her voice lowering again but carrying more weight than ever. You know what hurt the most, she said, looking directly at Mendeecees. It's not even the distance or the lies, it's the fact that you stopped seeing me like I mattered the same way. He frowned immediately. That's not fair, he said, but his voice didn't have the same strength behind it this time. Fair? Yandy repeated almost in disbelief. You want to talk about fair? Where was fair when I was out here defending you when people questioned you and I had to answer for things you did? Keisha's eyes widened slightly, clearly sensing there was more being hinted at than being said outright. What is she talking about? She asked again, this time more direct, and Mendeecees hesitated again, and that hesitation was louder than any confession could have been. Yandy let out a bitter laugh, shaking her head. Exactly, she said. Silence every single time because you don't want to take accountability, you just want me to keep playing the strong one. He stepped closer now, his voice tightening. Because you're strong, that's who you've always been. But Yandy shook her head immediately. No, I've been forced to be strong because you made me carry things I should have never had to carry alone. Keisha rubbed her temple. Slightly overwhelmed now. This is a lot, she muttered under her breath, but neither of them heard her because at this point they were locked into each other, the rest of the world fading out around them. So what now? Mendeecees asked finally, his voice quieter, almost defeated. You just walk away and that's it, you don't even try to fix it. Yandy stared at him for a long moment, and for a second it looked like she might break, like she might soften, but instead she straightened her posture and her voice came out clearer than ever. I tried already, she said. You just didn't listen when it mattered. That landed hard because there was no anger in it, just truth, and sometimes truth hits deeper than any argument ever could. The family was left divided because even Keisha didn't know what to say anymore. She could see both sides, but she could also see that something had clearly been broken for a while, something that might not be fixable anymore. And that's when Mendeecees did something unexpected. He laughed, but it wasn't humor, it was disbelief mixed with frustration. So all of this, all these years, all the things we've been through together just end like this over feelings and assumptions. And that was the wrong thing to say because Yandy's entire energy shifted instantly again. Don't you ever reduce what I'm saying to just feelings. She snapped, her voice sharp enough to cut through the air. That's exactly the problem, you never take it seriously until it's too late. Keisha stepped forward again, her voice firmer now. Mendeecees, you gotta stop dismissing her like that because that's pushing her further away. He looked at her, then back at Yandy, clearly torn between frustration and realization, but still struggling to fully accept what was happening. So what do you want me to say? He asked, throwing his hands up slightly. You want me to just stand here and agree that everything's my fault? Yandy's expression softened just a fraction, but only for a moment. I want you to own your part, she said quietly. Just once, without deflecting, without making excuses, without turning it back on me. There was a long pause, and this time it wasn't filled with tension, it was filled with something heavier, something more final, because Mendeecees didn't respond right away. He just stood there thinking, and for the first time it looked like he was actually processing everything she had said, but the damage was already done because Yandy took a step back, creating physical distance now to match the emotional distance that had clearly been growing for a long time. I can't keep doing this, she said, her voice barely above a whisper now, but somehow still carrying through the entire room. I can't keep losing myself trying to hold on to something that's already slipping away. Fans are shocked because this wasn't just drama anymore. This was real, this was raw, this was a woman reaching her breaking point and finally saying enough. Keisha looked at her with concern. So what happens next? She asked softly, and Yandy didn't answer right away. She just looked at Mendeecees one last time, like she was memorizing his face, like she was saying goodbye without actually saying the word, and when she finally spoke her voice was steady again, almost too steady. What happens next is I choose peace, she said, even if that means choosing it alone. And that was the moment everything truly shifted because there was no anger left, no yelling, no chaos, just a calm finality that made it clear this wasn't just another fight, this was a turning point, one that might not have a way back. And Mendeecees felt it too because for the first time he didn't argue, he didn't push back, he just stood there watching her like he was realizing he might actually lose her this time. And as the silence filled the room once again, Keisha exhaled slowly, knowing that whatever came next, nothing would ever be the same again, because some words once said can't be taken back, and some decisions once made change everything forever. The silence didn't break right away, it stretched heavy and uncomfortable, like the entire room was holding its breath, waiting to see who would move first, but Yandy didn't. She stood there steady, unmoved, like she had finally reached a place inside herself where there was no more second guessing, no more waiting for someone else to change. And Mendeecees could feel it, that shift, that distance that was no longer just emotional but something deeper, something permanent. So that's it, he finally said, his voice low, almost uncertain, like he was testing the reality of what was happening. You just done with me? Yandy didn't answer immediately, and that pause alone felt louder than anything she could have said, because for years she had always responded, always fought, always tried, but now she just looked at him like she was seeing him clearly for the first time, without excuses, without hope clouding her judgment. I'm done fighting for something that feels one-sided, she said finally, and the way she said it made it clear this wasn't anger anymore, this was clarity, and that hit Mendeecees differently because anger, he could handle anger, meant there was still emotion, still attachment, but this calm, this distance, this acceptance that scared him more than anything else ever had. Keisha shifted again, her hands resting on her hips, her face tense as she looked between them. Y'all really about to let it end like this? She said, her voice carrying a mix of frustration and disbelief. After everything y'all built, after everything people have seen y'all go through. Fans are shocked because even Keisha, who had witnessed the cracks firsthand, didn't expect it to reach this point, not this fast, not this final. But Yandy shook her head slowly. It didn't end today, she said quietly. It's been ending for a while. I just finally said it out loud. And that right there changed the entire perspective, because suddenly this wasn't about one argument or one moment, this was about a slow breakdown, something that had been happening behind the scenes while everyone else only saw the surface. Mendeecees clenched his jaw, his frustration rising again, but this time mixed with something raw, something vulnerable. So what, you just been planning this? He asked. You been waiting for the right moment to walk away? Yandy's brows furrowed immediately. Don't twist this into something it's not, she replied, her tone sharp again. This isn't some plan, this is me finally reacting to what you've been doing. Keisha looked at him now, her gaze serious. She keeps saying that and you keep dodging it, she pointed out. What exactly has been going on that she feels like this? And that's when Mendeecees finally snapped, not in anger but in defense. Nothing's been going on like that, he insisted quickly. She just takes things too far, reads too much into stuff, and then builds it up in her head until it looks bigger than it is. Yandy let out a slow breath, shaking her head in disappointment. Wow, she said under her breath. Even now you're still doing it, minimizing everything, making it seem like I'm crazy for noticing what's right in front of me. He stepped closer again, his voice rising. Because you're taking it too far, you're acting like I betrayed you or something when I haven't done anything like that. And that was the moment something in Yandy completely shut off. Her expression went blank. Not cold, not angry, just blank, like she had finally reached the point where arguing didn't even feel worth it anymore. That's the problem, she said quietly. You think betrayal only looks one way, you think it has to be something obvious, something loud, but it doesn't. Sometimes it's in the little things, the distance, the way you stop showing up, the way you stop choosing your partner every day. Keisha nodded slowly, clearly understanding what Yandy meant, even if Mendeecees wasn't ready to accept it. Emotional neglect is real, she added softly, and it can break things just as bad as anything else. Mendeecees shook his head again, pacing like he was trying to outrun the conversation itself. Man, this is crazy, he muttered. I'm standing here getting accused of stuff that ain't even real. Yandy crossed her arms now, not defensive but firm. Just because you don't see it doesn't mean it's not real for me, she replied. And that's been the issue, you never really listened, you just waited for your turn to respond. The family was left divided because at this point it was clear there were two completely different realities happening at the same time, one where Mendeecees felt blindsided and one where Yandy felt ignored for far too long, and neither one seemed able to fully step into the other's perspective. So what do you want from me right now? He asked finally, his voice strained. You want me to beg you to stay? You want me to admit to things I don't even believe are true? Yandy looked at him for a long moment, and this time there was a softness there, but it wasn't hope, it was acceptance. I wanted effort, she said simply. I wanted consistency, I wanted to feel like I mattered the same way I made you matter, and I kept asking for that in different ways for a long time. You just didn't hear me. Keisha exhaled slowly, her shoulders dropping slightly. This is deeper than a fight, she said. This is years of stuff finally coming out all at once. And she wasn't wrong, because the way they were speaking out, the things being said, this wasn't new, this was just finally being voiced out loud. And that's when something unexpected happened again. Mendeecees stopped pacing, he stopped talking, and he just stood there looking at Yandy, really looking at her like he was trying to see what he had been missing all this time. And for a moment it felt like maybe, just maybe, something might shift, but then he spoke, and whatever chance there was faded instantly. I can't fix something I don't believe is broken the way you saying it is, he said, and that was it. That was the moment the last thread snapped, because Yandy's face didn't show anger, didn't show hurt, it showed closure. Then there's nothing left to fix, she replied calmly, and Keisha's eyes widened slightly, realizing what that meant. Yandy, she started, but Yandy shook her head, gently cutting her off. No, it's okay, she said. I'm not sad about it anymore, I'm just done. Fans are shocked because that calmness, that acceptance, that lack of emotion was more powerful than any screaming match could ever be. It meant she had already processed this long before this moment even happened, and now she was just saying it out loud, making it real. You really walking away? Mendeecees said again, this time almost to himself like he still couldn't fully believe it, and Yandy nodded slowly. Yeah, she said, I am, and there it was, no dramatic music, no yelling, no chaos, just a quiet decision that carried more weight than anything else, because sometimes the end of something isn't loud, sometimes it's quiet, sometimes it's just a moment where one person realizes they can't keep holding on by themselves and chooses to let go. And as Yandy turned slightly, her body angling away from him for the first time, it became clear that this wasn't just talk, this wasn't just a threat, this was happening. And Keisha stood there frozen, her mind racing, trying to figure out if there was anything at all that could still be said to change this outcome. But deep down she knew the truths and decisions once made don't get undone, and this felt like one of those moments. In Mendeecees, he felt it too, because for the first time since this all started, he didn't argue, he didn't raise his voice, he didn't try to stop her, he just stood there watching as the reality of losing her settled in piece by piece, heavier with every second that passed. And even though the room was filled with people, cameras, emotions, everything, it somehow felt empty, because something important, something foundational had just broken, and no one knew if it could ever be put back together again. And as Yandy took another step forward, creating even more distance between them, the weight of everything they had built, everything they had been through, everything they were now risking, hung in the air unanswered, unresolved, and painfully real. The air felt heavier with every second that passed, and even the smallest movement seemed amplified, as if the room itself was reacting to what was unfolding right in front of them. Yandy didn't rush, she didn't look back immediately, she just took another slow step forward, her heels echoing softly against the floor, and that sound alone felt like a countdown to something irreversible. Mendeecees finally moved, but not fast enough, not with the urgency everyone expected. Instead, it was hesitant, like he still hadn't fully decided whether to fight for this moment or let it slip away. So you're really not even gonna look back? He called out, his voice carrying more vulnerability than before, and that right there made Keisha glance at him differently, because for the first time he didn't sound defensive, he sounded unsure, almost afraid. But Yandy paused mid-step, her shoulders rising slightly as she took a breath, and for a moment it felt like everything might shift again, like maybe, just maybe, this was the point where she would turn around, where emotions would flood back, and where everything would unravel into tears and second chances. But when she finally turned, her face wasn't what anyone expected. It wasn't soft, it wasn't broken, it was composed, almost peaceful, and that peace hit harder than any anger ever could. I already looked back too many times, she said quietly. That's how I stayed this long. Keisha's hand slowly covered her mouth, the weight of those words settling deep, because emotions ran high. But this wasn't chaotic anymore, this was clarity, and clarity can be brutal when it finally shows up. Yandy. Keisha started again, her voice softer, now more emotional. You sure this the only way? But Yandy gave a small nod, her eyes briefly meeting Keisha's, and in that moment there was love, there appreciation even, but no hesitation. I'm sure, she replied simply, and Mendeecees exhaled sharply, turning away for a second as if trying to process everything, but it wasn't working, nothing was making sense the way it used to. This don't even feel real, he muttered under his breath, running his hands over his face again. Like, how did we even get here? And the question lingered in the air, because it was the one thing nobody could fully answer, not with one moment, not with one mistake. This was layers built over time, things unsaid, things ignored, things pushed aside until they couldn't be hidden anymore. Fans are shocked because what they're witnessing isn't just drama, it's the collapse of something that once looked unbreakable, something that people rooted for, something that defined strength, loyalty, and resilience for so long, now unraveling in real time. And the family was left divided, not just physically but emotionally, because even Keisha felt torn. Part of her wanted to push Yandy to reconsider, to fight harder, to stay, but another part of her understood exactly why she couldn't anymore. You not even gonna try canceling or something? Keisha asked softly, one last attempt to find a middle ground, but Yandy shook her head gently. I tried to fix it before it got here, she said. I tried to talk, I tried to reach him, I tried everything I knew how to do, and it just kept feeling like I was the only one trying. Mendeecees turned back toward her quickly. That's not true, he said, but his voice lacked conviction, and even he seemed to hear it. I didn't know it was this serious. And that right there changed the energy again, because Yandy's expression shifted just slightly, not back to anger, not even disappointment, just a quiet acknowledgement. And that's the problem, she said. You didn't know because you didn't pay attention to the signs I was giving you. You thought I'd always be here no matter what. Keisha looked at him again, her gaze steady. Did you? She asked directly. Did you think she would never leave? And Mendeecees didn't answer right away because the truth sat heavy in his chest, the kind of truth you don't say out loud because saying it makes everything real. And finally he looked down, shaking his head slowly. I guess I did, he admitted quietly, and that admission hit different because it was honest, but it came too late. Yandy nodded once, like she had already accepted that long before this moment. Exactly, she said, and that's why I have to leave now, because I need to show myself that I won't stay where I'm not valued the way I deserve. Keisha blinked back, tears clearly overwhelmed by the reality of it all. This is crazy, she whispered, like I never thought I'd see this day. And neither did the fans, because everything about this moment felt surreal, the kind of scene that people replay over and over trying to understand where it all went wrong. So what happens after this? Mendeecees asked, his voice quieter, now stripped of all the defensiveness that had been there earlier. We just go our separate ways, like none of this mattered. Yandy's face softened slightly, but her words remained firm. It mattered, she said. It will always matter, but that doesn't mean it's meant to continue. Sometimes things can be real and still come to an end. And the perspective landed heavy because it wasn't bitter, it wasn't angry, it was acceptance, the kind that only comes after a long internal battle. Keisha wiped her face quickly, trying to compose herself. I just hate that it had to get to this point, she admitted, like I feel like there had to be another way. Yandy gave a small sad smile. Maybe there was, she said, but not with where we were and not with how things kept going. Mendeecees stepped forward again, this time more cautiously, like he was afraid of pushing her further away. So this really it? He said. No more chances, no more conversations, no more trying. Yandy looked at him for a long moment, and for the first time there was a visible flicker of emotion, something that almost looked like grief, but she didn't let it take over. This is me choosing myself, she said, and I can't undo that. The silence that followed felt heavier than anything that came before, because this was the moment where reality fully settled in. No more arguing, no more denial, no more hoping it would just pass. This was real, and it wasn't changing. Keisha stood still, her mind racing, trying to hold on to something, anything that could shift this outcome, but deep down she knew it was already decided. I just hope y'all don't regret this later, she said quietly, and Yandy nodded slowly. Maybe we will, she admitted, but staying and losing myself would be a bigger regret. And that honesty cut through everything, because it made it clear this wasn't about winning or losing, this wasn't about proving a point, this was about survival, emotional survival, and choosing peace over chaos. Even when it hurt. And as Yandy finally turned fully toward the exit, her steps steady, her posture strong, it became undeniable that this chapter was closing right in front of them. Mendeecees didn't move this time, he didn't call out again, he didn't try to stop her, he just watched, and that stillness said everything, because sometimes, when you realize you've lost something, you don't fight, you just stand there wishing you had done things differently before it got to this point. And Keisha looked between them one last time, her heart heavy, knowing she had just witnessed something that would change everything moving forward, not just for them but for everyone connected to them, because when a foundation like that cracks, it sends shockwaves through everything around it. And as the distance between Yandy and Mendeecees grew with each step she took, the finality of it all became impossible to ignore. This wasn't just another moment for the cameras, this wasn't just another storyline, this was a real ending unfolding in real time, and no one in that room could stop it, no one could rewind it, no one could fix it, because some choices once made can't be undone, and some goodbyes don't need words to be understood. And just like that, without another glance, without another word, Yandy kept walking forward, leaving behind everything that no longer felt like home. And for the first time since it all began, there was nothing left to say, nothing left to argue, nothing left to hold on to, just silence, heavy and undeniable, marking the end of something that once felt unbreakable but had finally reached its breaking point. The silence didn't just linger after Yandy walked away, it settled into the room like something permanent, something that refused to move no matter how much anyone wished it would. And Mendeecees remained exactly where he was standing, his eyes fixed on the space she had just left, as if staring long enough might somehow bring her back, but it didn't, because reality had already taken hold, and this time it wasn't bending for anyone. Keisha shifted slowly, her steps cautious as she moved closer to him, her voice softer, now stripped of all earlier urgency. You okay? She asked. Even though the answer was obvious, he let out a dry laugh, but there was no humor in it, just disbelief and regret tangled together. Nah, he admitted quietly. I'm not okay at all. Fans are shocked because this wasn't the confident, composed version of him they were used to. This was someone unraveling in real time, forced to face a loss he never thought would actually happen. I didn't think she'd really leave, He continued shaking his head slightly like he still couldn't process it. I thought she'd cool off like she always does. Keisha nodded slowly, her expression serious because that right there was the truth that changed everything. That's exactly why she had to go, she said, because you got used to her staying no matter what. And those words hit him harder than anything else had because deep down he knew it was true. He had relied on her strength, her patience, her willingness to fight for them even when things weren't balanced, and now that safety net was gone. So what, I'm just supposed to accept this? He asked, looking at her now, his voice searching for something, anything that could make this feel less final. I don't even get a chance to fix it. Keisha hesitated for a moment, choosing her words carefully because emotions ran high, but this wasn't the time for sugarcoating. You had chances, she said gently. You just didn't see them as chances at the time. And that realization sat heavy because it meant this ending didn't come out of nowhere. It was built slowly, moment by moment, until there was nothing left to hold onto. Mendeecees exhaled deeply, pacing again but slower now, like every step carried weight. This is crazy, he muttered. All these years, all the things we went through together, and it ends like this. Just quiet. Keisha watched him closely, her arms folded, not in judgment but in understanding. Sometimes quiet endings are the loudest ones, she said, because everything that needed to be said already happened before the moment even came. And that perspective only made it harder to accept because it meant there was no single thing to fix, no single apology that could undo everything. It was layers, too many layers built over time. The family was left divided because outside the room conversations were already starting, whispers spreading, reactions forming, some people siding with Yandy, understanding her need to choose herself, while others questioned whether things could have been worked out if both sides had just pushed a little harder. But inside that moment, inside that space, there was no audience, no opinions, just the aftermath of something real. Keisha took a step closer, her tone shifting slightly more direct now. What are you gonna do? She asked, because that was the question that mattered, not what had happened, not what could have been, but what came next. And Mendeecees stopped pacing again, his shoulders dropping slightly as he let out another breath. I don't even know, he admitted. I've never had to picture my life without her in it like this. And that vulnerability felt different because it wasn't defensive, it wasn't reactive, it was honest in a way he hadn't been before. You might have to start now, Keisha said quietly, not harsh, not cold, just real. And he nodded slowly, the weight of the truth settling in deeper with every second. I just wish I caught it sooner, he added, his voice lower now. All the things she was saying, all the signs, I should have seen it before it got here. Keisha gave a small nod. A lot of people don't realize what they have until it's already slipping away, she said. And by the time they notice, it's already too late to hold on to it the same way. And that was the part that hit the hardest, because it wasn't just about losing her, it was about knowing that things could have been different if he had just paid attention sooner, if he had just taken her words seriously before they turned into silence and distance and eventually departure. Fans are shocked, because what started as an intense confrontation turned into something deeper, something more reflective, something that forced everyone watching to think about their own relationships, their own patterns, their own moments where they might have ignored signs until it was too late. Do you think she'll come back? He asked suddenly, the question slipping out almost instinctively like a last thread of hope he wasn't ready to let go of yet. Keisha paused again, this time longer, because she knew the weight of that question. She knew how much he needed the answer to be yes, but she also knew she couldn't give him false hope. I think she meant what she said, she replied carefully, and when someone reaches that level of clarity, it's not easy to turn back from it. He nodded again slowly, the hope in his expression dimming but not disappearing completely. Yeah, he said softly. I felt that too, and that admission marked another shift, because now he wasn't arguing against the reality anymore. He was starting to accept it, even if it hurt, even if it felt impossible. You still got time to reflect though, Keisha added, to understand your part in all this, because whether she comes back or not, you gotta grow from this. And he looked at her, then really looked at her, like he was hearing something important for the first time. Yeah, he agreed quietly. I do. The room felt different now, calmer but heavier, like the storm had passed but left everything changed in its wake. And as the cameras lingered on the aftermath, it became clear that this wasn't just the end of a relationship, it was the beginning of something else, something uncertain, something uncomfortable but necessary, because growth rarely comes from comfort, it comes from moments like this, moments where everything you thought was stable suddenly isn't, and you're forced to rebuild from the ground up. Keisha glanced toward the doorway where Yandy had disappeared earlier, her expression thoughtful. She's strong, she said softly, almost to herself. But even strong people get tired of carrying everything alone. And that statement summed it all up in a way nothing else could, because it wasn't about blame, it wasn't about who was right or wrong, it was about imbalance, about effort, about the quiet ways relationships can break when one person feels like they're holding more than their share for too long. Mendeecees followed her gaze for a moment, his face unreadable now, somewhere between regret and realization. I just hope she finds what she's looking for, he said, and there was sincerity in it even through the pain. Even if it's not with me, Keisha nodded slowly, and I hope you figure out what you need to change so this doesn't happen again. She replied, because that was the other side of it, the lesson, the part that often gets overlooked in the middle of the drama. And as the moment settled into something quieter, something more reflective, the reality of everything that had just happened became undeniable. This wasn't just another chapter in a long story, this was a turning point, one that would reshape everything moving forward, not just for them but for everyone watching, because sometimes the most powerful moments aren't the loud explosive ones, sometimes they're the quiet endings, the ones that leave you sitting there thinking about what it all meant, what could have been different, and what comes next. And as Mendeecees finally turned away from the space she had left behind, his steps slower, heavier, it was clear that even though the argument was over, the real journey, the one filled with reflection, accountability, and change, was only just beginning, and whether or not their paths would ever cross the same way again remained uncertain. But one thing was undeniable: nothing would ever be the same after this moment, nothing at all. Outside the room, the energy was completely different, but no less intense. Word had already started spreading through the cast and crew, and everywhere you looked there were whispers, side glances, and phones lighting up as fans or shocked reactions began pouring in faster than anyone could keep up with. Did she really just leave him like that? Nah, this can't be real. This gotta be for the cameras. But those who had been close enough to feel the tension knew this wasn't performance, this was real, and the weight of it was already shifting the dynamic of everything around them. Inside the hallway, Yandy kept walking, her steps steady, but her chest rising and falling just a little faster now that she was out of sight of Mendeecees, because holding that level of composure didn't mean it didn't hurt, it just meant she refused to break where everyone could see her. Keisha lingered a few seconds longer in the room before finally stepping out, to her eyes scanning the hallway until she spotted Yandy standing near the corner, her back against the wall, her arms crossed tightly like she was holding herself together. Keisha approached slowly, her voice softer than before. You good? She asked, and Yandy let out a small breath, her head tilting back slightly against the wall. I will be, she answered. And even though her tone was calm, there was a slight crack underneath it, something human, something vulnerable that hadn't been there moments ago. Keisha nodded, stepping closer. That was a lot, she said plainly, and Yandy gave a short, almost humorless laugh. Yeah, it was. There was a pause between them, not awkward, just heavy, because sometimes words don't come easy after something like that, and Keisha studied her face carefully. You really done? She asked one more time, needing to hear it again, maybe hoping the answer would change, but Yandy's eyes met hers, steady, unwavering. I've been done. I just finally stopped pretending I wasn't. And that honesty sat deep because emotions ran high, but this wasn't chaos anymore, this was resolution, the kind that comes after you've exhausted every other option. He didn't see it coming, Keisha added gently, and Yandy shook her head. He didn't want to see it coming, she corrected, because if he did, he would have had to change, and it's easier to ignore something than to fix it. Keisha couldn't argue with that because she had seen it too, the subtle things, the disconnect, the way conversations never quite landed the way they used to, and the family was left divided, not just between opinions but between understanding and denial. People are already talking, Keisha said, glancing down the hallway where a few cast members pretended not to stare too hard. You know how this goes, everybody got something to say. Yandy shrugged slightly, pushing herself off the wall. They always do, she replied, but they don't live it, they don't feel it the way I do, so their opinions don't change my decision. Fans are shocked because this level of certainty isn't something they expected, not from her, not in this situation, but that's what makes it hit harder, because it shows this wasn't impulsive, it was built over time, piece by piece, until there was nothing left to question. What about the kids? Keisha asked carefully, and for the first time Yandy's expression shifted. Again, not breaking but softening, because that was the part that mattered most beyond everything else. They're my priority always, she said, and that's another reason I had to make this choice, because I don't want them growing up thinking this is what a healthy relationship looks like. Keisha nodded slowly, understanding that completely. That's real, she admitted. A lot of people stay for the kids, but don't realize what the kids are actually seeing. And Yandy exhaled softly. Exactly, I want them to see strength, but not the kind that means suffering in silence. I want them to see boundaries, I want them to see self-respect. and the perspective added another layer to everything because it wasn't just about her anymore, it was about the example she was setting, the message she was sending with that. Even saying a word down the hall, a couple of voices grew louder as more cast members started piecing together what had happened. One of them shook their head in disbelief. "Ain't no way she actually left like that," another responded. "I mean, you saw how serious she was. That didn't look like acting to me." And those conversations only fueled the atmosphere because everyone could feel the shift. Something major had just happened and there was no going back. Keisha glanced back once more toward the room they had left behind. "He's not taking it well," she said, and Yandy's gaze dropped for a brief moment before she looked back up. "I didn't expect him to," she admitted, "but that doesn't mean I stayed just to make it easier for him." And that statement carried weight because it highlighted something many people struggle with, the idea that leaving doesn't have to be mutual to be necessary. Sometimes one person reaches their limit before the other even realizes there's a problem, and that's exactly what this looked like. "Do you think he'll try to fix it now?" Keisha asked, and Yandy paused for a second, considering it before giving a small nod. "Maybe," she said, "but the question is why now? Why does it take me walking away for things to suddenly matter enough to fix?" Keisha sighed slightly. "That's usually how it goes. People react when they feel like they're about to lose something, not when they still have it." And the truth lingered between them because it explained so much without needing more words. The hallway continued to buzz with quiet reactions as fans online started flooding comment sections, speculating, analyzing, picking sides, some defending Yandy's decision, others questioning whether things could have been saved, but none of them were in that room. None of them felt the years of build-up that led to this exact moment. "I just hope you're ready for everything that comes with this," Keisha said finally, because she knew it wasn't just about leaving, it was about everything that followed: the conversations, the opinions, the adjustments, the emotional aftermath. And Yandy gave a small but confident nod. "I am," she said, because staying was harder than leaving ever could be. And that right there said everything, because it revealed the truth behind her strength. It wasn't that this didn't hurt, it was that she had already endured more than she was willing to continue accepting. Inside the room, Mendeecees finally sat down, his elbows resting on his knees, his hands clasped together as he stared at the floor. The silence around him louder than any argument had been earlier. One of the crew members shifted awkwardly, unsure whether to say something or leave him alone, but he didn't acknowledge anyone, his mind clearly replaying everything that had just happened, every word, every pause, every missed opportunity to respond differently. And for the first time, it wasn't about defending himself, it was about understanding what he had lost and why. Keisha's voice echoed faintly in his memory, reminding him that chances had been there all along, they just didn't look urgent until now. And that realization sat heavy because it meant this wasn't just bad timing, it was a pattern, one he hadn't recognized until it was too late. Back in the hallway, Yandy straightened her posture again, her composure returning fully as she prepared to move forward, not just physically but emotionally. "I'm not looking back," she said quietly, more to herself than anyone else, and Keisha gave a small supportive nod. "Then don't," she replied. "Just keep moving forward." And as Yandy took another step away from that moment, from that chapter, from everything that had just unfolded, it became clear that this wasn't just an ending, it was a beginning too, not the kind filled with excitement or relief, but the kind that comes with growth, with change, with the uncomfortable but necessary process of rebuilding yourself after letting go of something that once felt permanent. And as the cameras continued to capture every second, every glance, every reaction, one thing remained undeniable: this wasn't just another storyline, this was a turning point, one that would leave its mark long after the moment itself had passed, because some decisions don't just change the present, they reshape the future, and for everyone involved, nothing would ever be the same again, nothing at all. Time didn't slow down. After that moment, it moved forward whether anyone was ready or not, and the ripple effects started showing up almost immediately. Phones buzzing nonstop, messages stacking up, group chats lighting up with questions, opinions, and reactions as fans are shocked flooded social media trying to make sense of what had just happened. Clips were already being replayed, analyzed frame by frame, people pointing at every look, every pause, every word that now carried new meaning. "She been checked out," one comment read. "Nah, he really lost her for real this time," another said, and the divide was clear because the family was left divided, not just on screen but everywhere. People stood either understanding Yandy's decision or questioning if things had been pushed too far too fast, but inside her world none of that noise mattered, because she had already made the choice and now she had to live in it fully, without hesitation, without doubt. Keisha stayed close, walking beside her as they moved further away from the chaos, the tension from earlier still lingering but shifting into something quieter, something more reflective. "You feel lighter?" Keisha asked after a moment, and Yandy paused slightly, considering the questioned before answering honestly. I feel different, she said. Not lighter, not yet, but clearer, like I can finally breathe without questioning everything. And that honesty spoke volumes because it showed that strength doesn't erase pain, it just allows you to move through it with purpose. Keisha nodded, understanding that completely. Clarity is everything, she said. Once you got that, it's hard to go back to confusion. And Yandy gave a small agreeing hum, her gaze focused ahead, not on where she had been but on where she was going next. I spent too long trying to make sense of things that didn't feel right, she admitted. Always second-guessing myself, always wondering if I was asking for too much when really I was just asking for the bare minimum. Keisha glanced at her with a knowing look. That's the part people don't talk about enough, she said. How easy it is to start shrinking yourself just to keep something together. And Yandy let out a soft breath. I'm not doing that anymore, she said simply, and that statement carried quiet power because it marked a boundary not just for this situation but for everything moving forward. Back in the room, Mendeecees finally stood again. The stillness no longer bearable as he grabbed his phone, scrolling through notifications that seemed to multiply by the second. Missed calls, messages, headlines already starting to form, and he shook his head, slightly overwhelmed. This is crazy, he muttered, but even as he said it he knew this wasn't about the outside noise, this was about what had happened between them, what had been building for a long time without him fully acknowledging it, and now that it was out there was no avoiding it anymore. One of the producers stepped closer cautiously. You wanna say anything? They asked, and he looked up for a second like he might respond but then shook his head. Not right now, he said, because there were no words that felt right, no statement that could capture everything he was feeling in that moment. Regret, confusion, realization, all tangled together in a way that didn't translate easily into something simple. Down the hall, the conversations continued, growing louder as more people got involved, theories spreading, assumptions forming. You think they done for good? Someone asked. I don't know, but she looked serious, another replied, and that repeated word serious seemed to echo everywhere because that's what stood out the most. This didn't feel temporary, it didn't feel like something that would blow over with time, it felt final, and that's what made it hit harder than anything else. Keisha eventually stopped walking, turning to face Yandy fully. You know, this next part not gonna be easy, she said, and Yandy nodded immediately. I know, she replied, but easy wasn't what I had before either, so at least now I'm choosing my struggle instead of being stuck in one I didn't choose. And that perspective landed heavy because it reframed everything. This wasn't about escaping difficulty, it was about choosing a different kind, one that led somewhere better instead of keeping her stuck in the same cycle. People gonna have a lot to say, Keisha added, and Yandy gave a small shrug. They always do, she repeated, but none of them have to wake up in my life, deal with my reality, or carry my emotions, so they don't get to decide what I should have done. Fans are shocked because that level of self-awareness, that refusal to be swayed by outside opinions, isn't something everyone expects to see in moments like this, but it shows just how far she had come mentally, emotionally, even before this moment happened. What about him? Keisha asked carefully, and Yandy's expression shifted just slightly, not regret, not doubt, but something softer, something human. I hope he learns from this, she said. I hope he grows, I hope he understands what went wrong, not just for me but for himself too, because nobody benefits from repeating the same patterns. And that statement showed there was no bitterness there, no desire to tear him down, just a clear boundary and a hope that something positive could still come from the situation, even if it wasn't together. Inside the room, Mendeecees finally stepped out, the hallway quieter now but still filled with that lingering tension as a few eyes turned toward him, quickly looking away again, unsure of how to react, and he walked slowly, his posture different from before, less guarded, more weighed down, as he caught sight of Yandy in the distance. For a brief second their eyes met, and in that moment everything they had been, everything they had built, everything they had lost seemed to pass between them without a single word. Keisha noticed it immediately, stepping slightly to the side, giving them that unspoken space even though nothing was said. Because sometimes silence carries more meaning than any conversation ever could. And Mendeecees stopped just for a second, like he might say something, like he might try one last time, but the words didn't come because deep down he knew this wasn't a moment that could be fixed with words alone, not anymore. And Yandy didn't move, she didn't step back toward him, she didn't signal anything, she just held that look for a second before turning away again, choosing forward over familiar, choosing herself over what used to be. And that was the final confirmation that this wasn't temporary, this wasn't uncertain, this was a decision fully made, fully owned. And as she walked again, this time without pausing, without looking back, the reality settled in completely for everyone watching. This chapter was closed. Not with a dramatic explosion, not with a chaotic ending, but with a quiet, powerful choice that changed everything and left no room for confusion about where things stood now, because sometimes the strongest statement isn't loud, sometimes it's simply walking away and meaning it. The moment didn't fade. After that it followed everyone like a shadow, stretching into every conversation, every glance, every quiet pause that came after, because what had happened wasn't something you just moved past, it was something that shifted everything, and as the hours went on the weight of it only grew heavier, not lighter. The cast gathered in small groups, voices low but intense as they tried to process what they had just witnessed. "I've never seen her like that before," one of them said, shaking their head slowly. "That wasn't just anger, that was something deeper," another replied. "That was someone who already made up their mind before she even walked into the room." And the truth echoed, because fans are shocked not just by what happened but by how certain it all felt, like a decision that had been quietly forming long before anyone else realized it. Keisha stayed close to Yandy even as the environment around them buzzed with reactions, her presence steady, not overwhelming, just there, in the way you need someone to be when everything changes at once. "You holding up?" she asked again later as they stepped into a quieter space away from the noise, and Yandy nodded slowly. "I am," she said. "It's just weird, like everything looks the same but it doesn't feel the same anymore." And that feeling was real, because when something big shifts internally, the world around you doesn't change right away, but your experience of it does. Everything feels unfamiliar, even the things you've known for years. Keisha leaned slightly against the wall beside her. "That's because you're not the same person you were before that moment," she said. "You made a choice that changes how you move from here on out." And Yandy let out a soft breath, her eyes lowering for a second before lifting again with quiet resolve. "And I'm okay with that," she said, because she meant it, even if it came with uncertainty, even if it meant stepping into something unknown. Inside another part of the building, Mendeecees sat with a couple of the guys, the energy around him different, no less performative, more real. "So what you thinking?" one of them asked carefully, and he shook his head slightly. "I'm thinking I messed up," he admitted, not in one big obvious way, but in all the small ways that added up, and I didn't even see it until it was too late. And that realization hit him harder than anything else, because it wasn't about one mistake, it was about patterns, habits, things he let slide, thinking they didn't matter as much as they actually did. "You think she coming back?" another asked, and he paused longer this time, really thinking about it before answering. "I don't know," he said honestly, "and for the first time I feel like it's not something I can just fix with a conversation or a promise. I think she really done this time." And that acceptance sat heavy, because it meant facing a future he hadn't planned for, one where she wasn't automatically there, one where he had to figure things out on his own. The family was left divided as the conversation spread, some people expressing support for Yandy's decision, others still holding on to the idea that things could somehow be repaired. But even among the doubt, there was a growing acknowledgement that something had fundamentally changed. This wasn't just a rough patch, this was a turning point. "I just don't understand how it got this far without him noticing," someone said quietly, and another responded. "Because when you're comfortable you stop paying attention to the details, and the details are what keep things together." And that statement carried weight, because it reflected something bigger than just this situation, something a lot of people could recognize in their own lives. Keisha eventually stepped away for a moment, giving Yandy some space to be alone. And as she did, Yandy stood there quietly, her thoughts moving faster than her expression showed, replaying everything, not with regret but with clarity, seeing the moments she had ignored, the times she had convinced herself to stay patient, to give it more time, to hope things would shift on their own, and realizing now that sometimes hope without action just delays the inevitable. "You did the right thing," she whispered to herself, not as reassurance but as confirmation, because deep down she knew she had reached a point where staying would have meant losing herself completely, and that was something she wasn't willing to do anymore. Fans are shocked, because what they expected to be another dramatic cycle of arguments and reconciliation turned into something much more final, something that forced everyone to rethink what strength really looks like, not just enduring but knowing when to walk away. And as the night continued, the energy slowly shifted from shock to reflection, people talking less about what happened and more about what it meant, what lessons could be taken from it, what signs they might have missed in their own lives, because moments like this don't just stay contained, they ripple outward, affecting everyone who witnesses them. Mendeecees eventually stood up again, stepping outside for some air, the cool breeze hitting his face as he exhaled, slowly looking up at the sky like he was searching for answers that weren't going to come easily. Yandy and Mendeecees' relationship reached a quiet but profound turning point as the night unfolded into separate paths forward. Sitting alone with his thoughts, Mendeecees whispered to himself, I should have listened sooner, no longer pushing away the regret but facing it directly as the first real step toward growth. Inside, Yandy moved with steady clarity, no longer seeking validation from anyone else. When Keisha asked if she was ready, Yandy simply replied, "Yeah," and the two walked out together, leaving the past behind, not as escape, but as a deliberate choice for something new built on boundaries and self-preservation. In the car, Yandy reflected on how long it had taken her to reach this moment, admitting she had ignored her instincts for years, patched together broken pieces instead of letting them fall, and held onto memories of what they once were rather than facing what they had become. "I miss what we had at our best," she told Keisha, "but I don't miss what it became, and that's the difference." She expressed no regret over her decision, only wishing it hadn't taken reaching this breaking point to make it. Keisha offered quiet understanding, noting that sometimes people only move when staying costs more than leaving ever could. Outside, Mendeecees lingered by his car, replaying moments he had brushed off, acknowledging the times he failed to take her feelings seriously and admitting he couldn't blame her if it was truly over. His friend listened as he reflected on treating their time together as endless instead of finite. The family remained divided, with mixed reactions pouring in, but Yandy felt grounded in her choice without needing external approval. Fans are shocked by the level of raw accountability and introspection on both sides, turning the personal drama into something deeply relatable about love, loyalty, self-worth, and the courage to walk away. What started as tension became a clear before and after moment that changed everything. This wasn't just an ending, it was a necessary shift forcing both to rebuild separately, one choosing herself, the other confronting patterns he could no longer ignore. The biggest question lingers. Did Yandy make the right decision by choosing herself, or should she have tried one more time? Did Mendeecees realize too late, or is there still a chance for him to grow? The story is far from over, leaving everyone talking about whether this divide is permanent or if something remains worth fighting for.